They came to escape, to build, to live. But the North had a different fire waiting for them.
Hello, and welcome back to Hope is Kindled, the podcast where we walk together through the stories that shape the spirit, challenge the mind, and search, sometimes in the darkest places, for the fragile, enduring light of hope. Today's episode will not be an easy one. Blood on the Forge is not a comforting book. It doesn't hand us lessons with a bow or close with tidy resolutions. But it may be one of the most important novels we've ever explored on this podcast. Let us be clear from the outset. This episode condemns racism in all its forms. It condemns violence against children and against any human being. There is no room in the human spirit, or in this podcast, for hatred, for white supremacy, for racial terror. We confront these realities not to sensationalize them, but to name them, understand them, and defeat them through knowledge, through courage, through hope, and through the power of storytelling. William Attaway's 1940, one novel, Blood on the Forge, is a haunting story of displacement, exploitation, and the psychological cost of progress. It is steeped in iron and ash, in violence and silence, but somewhere deep in that darkness flickers a light that refuses to die. The light of dignity, of memory, and of the human soul that will not be erased. This novel is a profound literary testament to the struggle, endurance, and dignity of African Americans during the Great Migration, a movement born from both hope and heartbreak. The Great Migration carried millions of souls northward from the fields of the post-Reconstruction South, seeking freedom and opportunity, only to find new chains forged in factories of steel and soot. At Hope is Kindled, we believe that the failure of Reconstruction was one of the most painful and preventable tragedies in American history, a failure that might never have happened had Abraham Lincoln lived to guide the nation's recovery. What was done to enslaved people was unspeakably wrong. But what wasn't done in the aftermath, the broken promises, the abandonment of equality, left wounds that echo still. We cannot claim to know the financial answers to reparations, nor can we take a political stance, but we can speak with moral clarity. Acknowledgement is the beginning of healing. We must honor the descendants of the enslaved and work together so that our entire human family may find justice, dignity, and success in this modern world. Blood on the Forge tells the story of three African American brothers, Big Matt, Chinatown, and Melody Moss, who leave behind a tenant farming life in Kentucky and head north in search of work and opportunity in the steel mills of Pennsylvania. They are drawn by promises of wages, of freedom, of a better life. But what they find is machinery that burns the soul, a world of gray snow and industrial soot, and a system that grinds men down. Each brother suffers in his own way. Big Matt, proud and powerful, loses himself in violence and despair. Chinatown, cunning and skeptical, watches the dream curdle. Melody, youngest and most innocent, seeks music and watches the song vanish. And as the brothers move forward, drawn by promises, by necessity, by the fragile hope of something better, there is a moment, quiet but devastating, when the truth begins to settle in. Not all at once, not as a dramatic realization, but as something felt, a shift, a separation. The understanding that this journey is not simply movement, it is rupture. Because to leave is one thing, but to leave knowing you cannot return, that something behind you is already closed, that the life you knew has already begun to disappear, that is something else entirely. And it is in that moment, that irreversible crossing, that Attaway gives us one of the most haunting lines in the novel.
The hills were back behind them, and they were gone. There was no going back, and there was nothing left to go back to.
It is a novel not of triumph, but of transformation. It chronicles the moment when hope and identity are melted together in the furnace of American industry, and only fragments emerge. After the Civil War, Reconstruction held a fragile promise. That formerly enslaved people would have rights, land, education, and representation. But by the late 1870s, Reconstruction collapsed under white supremacist backlash, political abandonment, and systemic violence. Jim Crow laws institutionalized segregation. Lynchings rose in number and brutality. Economic exploitation via sharecropping replaced slavery in all but name. Faced with this, millions of Black Americans fled the South in what became known as the Great Migration, a mass exodus from terror and toward hope. Between 1910 and 1970, more than 6 million African Americans relocated to the North, Midwest, and West. It was one of the largest internal movements of people in American history. And now, we return to the line we opened with, a line that carries the weight of everything that follows.
They had left behind the burning fields and the lynch rope, but in the North they found a new fire, one with iron teeth and 1,000 smokestacks.
What began as escape becomes something far more complicated. Steel mills, coal smoke, racial tension. The landscape has changed, but the wound has not. The racism of the North wears a different face, less visible perhaps, but no less cutting. The promise of freedom gives way to a new kind of confinement, one forged not in fields, but in factories. And William Attaway knew this world intimately, not as abstraction, not as distant history, but through the lived experience of those who carried it in their bones. Born in Mississippi and raised in Chicago, he writes with the authority of memory, the clarity of witness, and the weight of truth. Blood on the Forge is both deeply psychological and profoundly mythic. It captures the trauma of displacement, the unraveling of the black family, and the way capitalism consumes not only bodies, but souls. Big Matt becomes a tragic archetype, strength turned against itself, masculinity fractured by systemic dehumanization.
There was a fire in him now, not the fire of the forge, but of something hotter, burning too long with no name.
Chinatown, the trickster intelligence, navigates a rigged system with bitter insight, but finds no victory in seeing the truth. And Melody, tender and artistic, loses the most sacred thing of all, his song.
He listened, but there was no music left, only the hiss of the forge. He could still remember the feel of the strings beneath his fingers, but they had gone stiff, just like his heart.
The novel's language is spare and rhythmic, like hammer blows. It reads as both realism and prophecy. It recalls the voices of Faulkner, Richard Wright, and Ralph Ellison, yet it stands apart for its musicality and stark emotional economy. Its style bridges the physical and the spiritual, the historical and the mythic. Attaway does not give us heroes. He gives us men caught in a machine that devours hope. And yet, in telling their story, he reclaims something sacred, the truth itself. One of the most painful elements of Blood on the Forge is its meditation on dislocation, how migration, while necessary for survival, also severed roots of culture, language, and music. The Great Migration did not just move people, it dismantled worlds.
They had no names in this place, only numbers. But Melody could still hear the sound of his mother's voice calling him home.
This is the loss Attaway mourns, not only of family, but of connection to the land, to community, and to self. Yet he transforms that mourning into memory, making the novel itself a significant act of cultural preservation. He turns pain into testimony, silence into song. It stands beside the great works of social witness we've covered here, on Hope is Kindled. Attaway joins their chorus, showing us that suffering, when named, becomes a light. Even in its bleakest passages, Blood on the Forge refuses to strip its characters of humanity. There is still love. There is still longing. There are fleeting flashes of laughter and memory. There are fragments of music that survive the furnace. The tragedy of the Moss brothers is not only that they suffer, it's that they are severed from one another, from culture, and from creation itself. But here lies the hope, in the act of remembering. By naming what was broken, Attaway ensures it was not lost. Each page becomes a kindled ember against forgetting. Hope in this novel is quiet, but indestructible. It is found in memory of the South that shaped them, of stars and sky. Connection, the fragile, luminous threads between brothers. Voice Attaway's decision to write, to speak, to refuse erasure. For us, the readers, hope lives in recognition, in the courage to see clearly, to teach this history, and to honor the millions whose stories built the modern world.
Blood on the forge, blood in the ground, blood in the song.
It is not only pain, it is a map. William Attaway never published another novel. But this one, this singular, searing book, carries the weight of generations. It stands as testament that suffering leaves a record. Displacement is not disappearance. Even in silence, memory sings. Blood on the Forge teaches us that progress without empathy is destruction, that the cost of forgetting is too high, and that hope, though scarred, can never be extinguished. Let this episode be a flame carried forward. Good journey.